This message is entitled Biblical Basis for Human Rights, Part 1, and is given by John Warwick Montgomery.
Let me begin with two preliminary considerations. The first is that non-Christians, unbelievers, since the beginning of modern secularism in the 18th century, have not been doing very well in the area of human rights. The second is that neither have evangelical Christians. The impression is given by non-Christians, by secularists, that if we could throw off our religious superstitions, then we could enter into an era of equality and justice where human rights would prevail. Religion is made to appear as an opponent of human rights. But if we look at the history of modern civilization from the 18th century to the present, we find that it's the secularists, it's the non-Christians who have been creating the biggest problems in the areas of human rights. A very important book was published just a few years ago by Professor Hirschberg entitled The French Enlightenment and the Jews. The French Enlightenment and the Jews. This was published conjointly by Columbia and by the Jewish Publication Society of America. And in this carefully documented work of about 400 pages, Hirschberg shows that at every point the so-called secular enlightenment of the 18th century, at the time of the French Revolution, was antithetical to the human value of the Jew and indeed manifested racial prejudice right and left. Why was this? Well, the enlightened modern man simply couldn't stand the primitive Jew who was still locked into ancient superstition. If one could just get rid of ancient superstition, one could rise to the levels of modern civilization. And so the Jew was regarded as an inferior and primitive person who should not be given the same values as others. Studies have been done of our founding fathers, people such as Thomas Jefferson, who was enamored of the French Enlightenment, whose position was not that of biblical Christianity. These studies have shown that our founding fathers, who were influenced by the Enlightenment, were not at the forefront of human rights activity by any means. Jefferson maintained slaves. He did not attempt any abolition of slavery. He considered this a natural and normal kind of condition. If we move to the 19th century, we find secular philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche in Germany arguing on the basis of a philosophical kind of evolutionism that those who are the strongest have rights that the weak do not have. Nietzsche sets forth the concept of the Übermensch, the Superman. He roundly criticizes Jesus because of Jesus' weakness. Jesus wanted to be kind to those who were weak and unable to handle their own affairs. Said Nietzsche, that is the collapse of civilization. The strong must take control. There will be a survival of the fittest in a philosophical sense if the strong are able to put themselves to the fore. He talks about the Superman as the ideal. Interestingly enough, a small, relatively weak physically, and exceedingly mangy Austrian house painter by the name of Adolf read Nietzsche and found a great deal there which appealed to him. He saw himself as a potential Superman and endeavored to put that kind of philosophy into operation. You may be interested to know that in the Scopes evolution trial in 1925, the concluding arguments were never presented. There was an agreement between Darrow and Bryan not to present concluding arguments, but to let the case go to the jury without concluding arguments. But of course, Bryan presented had drawn up a very detailed concluding argument. This argument was made available 2 days after Bryan's death. Bryan died 5 days after the end of the Scopes evolution trial, July the 26th, 1925.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?